44 special versus 45 ACP, and we have our speared gold dot ammunition. And I've been trying to get this particular 44 special round for almost 5 years. It's been out of stock for 5 years, and it's finally back in stock. So that's our speared gold dot 200 grain gold dot hollow point. And I'm going to compare that to our 200 grain 45 acp+P. The 200 grain 45 ACP only comes in a plus P, so I'd like to compare 200 grain to 200 grain because 44 special and 45 ACP often are considered comparable. So our 200 grain gold dot here, we are actually rated at 875 feet per second through a 6-inch barrel, which is kind of an interesting barrel length that they're using. But I'm going to use my 4 1/4 inch Smith & Wesson Model 69 to test the 44 special. Our 45 ACP, this is actually not even listed on Spear's website, but other sources have it rated at 1,080 feet per second. And Spear does list a G2 version of this, a 45+P 200 grain, and that is rated at 1,080 feet per second. So I would say that's probably what it's rated at. No barrel length listed for that because I can't find that actual information on that. So, you know, a 5-inch semi-auto is actually 5.3 inch compared to a 4.2 inch revolver. A lot of people will say, well, that's an inch more barrel travel. That's not fair. But if you actually look at the overall size, you know, with measurements of semi-automatics, the chamber is included in that measurement. With a revolver, the chamber is not included in that measurement. So we actually have a little bit more barrel travel in this versus this, even though this has like a 1.1 inch longer barrel essentially. So we'll see what we get with these. We're going to go through the chronograph, see what kind of velocity and accuracy we get at the same time. Then I'm going to do my 10% clear ballistic test. So we're going to go into plain clear ballistics to see what the best potential of those shots are. No denim or anything like that in the way to clog a hollow point. I've been doing that because a lot of times if you go straight to testing with denim or fabric in the way, you get clogged hollow points, and you don't even get hollow point expansion to see what they're supposed to look like, how they're supposed to perform. So I like to do a plain clear ballistics shot and then move on to a real world simulation shot. So we'll do plain clear ballistics with both of these, then we'll do a real world simulation, 4 layers of denim on this first 3-inch piece that represents our pectoral muscle. After that, we'll have a 1/4 inch medium density fiberboard right here to represent hitting ribs or sternum, 16 more inches of clear ballistics, and then another 1/4 inch medium density fiberboard in the back to represent hitting back ribs. So clear ballistics is roughly a half representation of flesh, so 3 inches and 16 inches is more like an 1.5 inches and 8 inches, so it's kind of like a 9-inch individual here that we're trying to simulate. And we'll see how we do with both of those in a plain clear ballistic shot and a real world simulation shot. And then I am going to shoot at the steel target to see what kind of practical accuracy and recoil control I can get with these. So let's get started with this test. All right, first up we have our Spear Gold Dot 200 grain plus P. The G2 version of this lists a 5-inch test barrel, so they probably got the velocity numbers of a 1,080 feet per second through a 5-inch barrel. I'm using a 5.3 inch barrel. So let's see what I get with my Glock 41 here, see how close I get to 1,080 feet per second. (1,056). 1,088, 1,068, 1,077, 1,074. So I'm very surprised that we came pretty close. I actually tested a box of this a couple years ago and we had a lot less velocity than that. So it might have been just a pandemic box or something like that where it wasn't loaded right. Our 44 special. Rounds like these are often affectionately known as the flying ashtray. Spear had some 45 caliber versions of that, and the 44 caliber versions, because the hollow cavity is so massive compared to other hollow points, I might consider some of Barnes's solid copper hollow points as flying ashtrays as well. But 200 grain here, and we're rated at 875 feet per second through a 6-inch barrel. So let's see what I get in my 4 1/4 inch. See how close we get to 875 feet per second. 696, 698, 727, 758, 720. So that is very unimpressive. The recoil really surprised me. Normally when recoil surprises me, it's a muzzle jumping up in the air surprise. With us, I was surprised to get kind of a feel like a cap gun going on. Not a lot of recoil and just very, very low power. Case ejection is good though, and that's a problem sometimes with this revolver, so at least I got good case ejection. Let's hit our ballistics gel block and see how these compare. All right, our first shot in the plain clear ballistics. No denim in the way to clog a hollow point, no rib simulation to slow down penetration. Let's see what we get with our 45 acp+P. That hits that pretty hard. Let's see how our flying ashtray compares. 44 special, 200 grain. Let's go take a look. Well, very interesting here. Perfectly straight line penetration with that 44 special, and absolutely no expansion, even with, you know, without denim or anything like that in the way to clog a hollow point, even with that massive hollow cavity. So that's not very impressive to see that level of performance. Our 45 ACP though did quite well. A 45 ACP+P. So our bottom shot here is with our 45 auto +P, our top with our 44 special. Now I will say, for a non-expanding bullet, that does a lot more tearing in there than what typically non-expanding bullets do. And I'm also going to say it's better than a full metal jacket, because full metal jackets cause less damage and they often want to drift around a lot. That flat nose, even though it didn't expand, it kept it in a nice straight line penetration, so at least you're going to get some damage with that big open hollow cavity, even if it doesn't expand, and you're going to get a straight line penetration. But definitely better performance with our 45 auto +P. 45 auto +P, we got 12 3/4 inches of penetration. I know from the way this camera parallaxes things, you're going to think that's like 13 3/4, but it's 12 3/4 from a straight on view here. With our 44 special, we have about 19 3/4 inches. So not that much over penetration either. So let's put on our fabric, put on our denim, put in our rib simulations, and see how these compare in more of a real world simulation. All right, our real world simulation: 4 layers of denim, followed by 3 inches of clear ballistics to represent a pectoral muscle, followed by a 1/4 inch medium density fiberboard to represent hitting ribs or sternum, 16 more inches of clear ballistics, and then another 1/4 inch medium density fiberboard to represent back ribs. A lot of people like to question why 4 layers of denim. That's just been an IWBA protocol for a long time, because what it does is it takes, you know, fabric that's a lot more hard to get through than typical fabric like this. And my question to you guys would be, would you rather see something go through 1 layer of t-shirt because it's, you know, more likely to happen, not knowing if your round can defeat, you know, better fabric barriers, or would you rather see it defeat something better and know that you have it and not need it than need it and not have it? So 4 layers of denim is a good idea in my mind. So we'll see if we get with our 45 ACP+P through our real world simulation. All right, that knocked that around quite a bit. Let me set that back up and hit with the 44 special. All right, let's see if our flying ashtray can smoke this target. Same thing, real world simulation. See what this does. Let's go take a look. All right, so what I'm seeing here is fantastic performance with one that's known to not be a great performer, and then bad performance with the other one that's kind of known to be not a great performer also. So really fantastic performance with our 45 acp+P. So when we look at our rib simulation, our first one here, the bottom shot with that 45, just a massive hole going through that. And after doing that, still going in a straight line penetration, getting almost the same penetration we got through plain gel. That's really impressive. What's interesting here is that 44, even though, you know, I don't see really any evidence of meaningful expansion, that hole does look a little bit bigger than the starting diameter. And I see pieces of MDF in there, big chunks of it. So it's like the hollow cavity is filling up with that rib simulation and still dragging it through. So very impressive performance. But another thing I want to show here is this first 3-inch piece. Even after going through denim, the 45 on the bottom still has a massive amount of energy dump, and the 44 has a lot less than what it had in plain clear ballistics. So our 45 is still doing fantastic, and our 44 not so much. So our 45 ACP, really just great performance. Our total track went to exactly 12 inches. I might say 12 1/8 inch. It's still got plenty of penetration. A lot of people will say, well, that's not organic gel, you need to get 12 inches. But when you actually put the rib simulation in this, it brings my penetration numbers almost exactly to organic gel. So we're still getting 12 inches through MDF. That's 12 inches, that's fine. Really good performance. And generally rounds that dump their energy shallower rather than keeping going on generally do have higher stopping power in real world situations than ones that kind of slowly expand out. And we saw right away expansion. So that's going to have a really high effectiveness. Now the 44 Special, what I'm going to say is, for its recoil, this is not bad performance for its recoil. We still have more damage than a full metal jacket. Our penetration is at about 17.5 inches of penetration. So even though on most accounts here we're failing, we went too far, too deep with one shot and another shot, you know, it was fine, but you know, both of them didn't have expansion. For being failures of rounds, they are still 44 caliber rounds and still do more damage than, let's say, oftentimes a 380 that does expand. So you kind of got to look at it from that perspective, not just this is the protocol, 1.5 times expansion, this much penetration. You have to look at it that even though it failed within its own caliber, it's still a better option than a lot of options. But definitely here, our 45 is fantastic and a lot better performing than the 44. But the 44 had almost no recoil. So let's see how that does, how that relates to how quickly I can land these on target. So we'll pull these out of the block. We'll take a close-up look at these. Then I'll shoot our steel, try to hit the target as fast as I can, and see how, you know, the difference in recoil really applies to, you know, how well I can shoot these things. So let's do that. So here's a close-up look at these bullets. Absolutely fantastic performance. These ones going through plain gel. Here is our 45 acp+P. Just absolutely fantastic, perfect flowering, expansion, huge bullet. Went to adequate penetration depths. I think that did fantastic. That's one of the best rounds I've ever seen tested, in my opinion. Just, you know, dumping that energy, getting that big, penetrating just enough. Our 44 here. I thought I saw you try, but that was just a dream. It started to trump it out just a little bit. And looks like I could probably use it for an ashtray, actually now, but it didn't expand out. So not very impressive with that 44. Now here's something that's extremely impressive. A 45 ACP going through our denim and our rib simulation. You know, a lot of times gold dots will shrink down a huge percentage after going through denim, but for whatever reason the 45, I think it just has a certain power level to where it remains massively expanded. You know, like the 9mm version, it gets a lot smaller than the plain gel version when you go through denim and MDF, but the 45 version pretty much got just about as big as the one going through plain gel. Fantastic overall, just absolutely fantastic with that 45. Our 44, we had even less going on than through the plain gel. You know, it didn't want to expand because of that denim, then it's going to hit that rib simulation. That rib simulation will sometimes cause that to catch one side and kind of tumble a little bit. sometimes or deform like that. So just not very good performance with that 44 special, but absolutely fantastic with their 45 acp+P. So that's a close-up look at those bullets. 14 yards from the target, I'm just going to get a front sight picture and pop these off as fast as I think I can hit the target. So let's see how I can do with our 45 acp+P. Those shoot pretty good for me. Now we have much less recoil with our 44. Let's see what this does. I'm able to actually land them faster with this. I mean, it is a heavier gun and the recoil is a lot less, so that makes sense. But let's back up and see how I can do from a little more distance. All right, 40 yards from the target. Let me start with our 44 special, see how these shoot from 40 yards for me. All right, so those are heading just a little bit left for me. Let me try a few rounds with our 45. See how this does. Those are shooting good enough. I want to back up to 75 yards, so let me back up and see how these do from 75 yards. All right, 75 yards from the target. I'll try our 44 special. These were shooting just a little bit left at 40 yards, so I think I'm going to have to aim just a little bit on the right side of that target. Let's see if I can make any hits from 75 yards with our 44 here. I grazed that last one. Not bad. Any misses are on me. They are definitely shooting to the left because I was aiming off the target a little bit to the right. And you know, that's not as easy as what it seems like because the sight is roughly the size of the target at that. So you're basically covering, you know, the whole target with that sight, then trying to move it off to the right. But for what it is, I'd say not too bad. Now our 45 ACP, let's see how I can do with this from 75 yards. All right, so I'm not going to complain about missing one of those. Overall, pretty darn good for this ammo. And that's what I like about the 45. A lot of people don't like the 45, and they'll go on and on. They'll give me rants for a long time about how the ammo was way too expensive, and they got to have 9mm this and 9mm that. One thing that I've always seen with 9mm versus 45 ACP is with 9mm, you got to get it to a certain velocity. You lose even a little bit, and you lose 50 feet per second for some reason. It really alters what's going to happen with that bullet. It alters its trajectory on target from distance and all of that. With the 45 ACP, you have a lot more leeway there. Once you get to a certain level, you know, you can lose 50 feet per second. It's not going to change anything. It's going to continue to perform well. It's going to continue its accuracy. But back onto what we're doing here, 44 special versus 45 ACP. You know, the 44 special here, it's not a bad choice. It just doesn't expand the way you'd want something to expand. And especially if you shot it through a shorter barrel, honestly, I don't think you would really have slower velocities through a shorter barrel. You know, that's one of the things in the firearms world that a lot of people don't understand. They think more barrel means more velocity, period, always. But when you get down to rounds like this, where you're getting in that about 700 feet per second, that's kind of, you're loaded so light that once you go to a longer barrel, you actually start losing velocity from bullet drag. You can see that with the old school Federal HST 38 special and the Federal Punch 44 special. You actually have, you know, more velocity in a short barrel. So I'm not going to say that this 44 would be worse than this performance and like a Charter Arms, I think it would be roughly the same velocity and all of that. For what it is, it's not bad. I mean, the recoil is, in this gun anyways, is like shooting a 38 special, if that. Yet you still got a 200 grain bullet that's tearing through and causing a good amount of damage, even though it's not expanding. It's penetrating in a straight line. So for what it is, it's not bad. Our 45 here, 45+P, this is absolutely fantastic, at least through this 5-inch barrel. I'm thinking about actually getting an M&P or a Springfield shorter barrel to test this stuff, because I think this would probably do well in that as well. But fantastic performance through my 5.3-inch barrel, just absolutely fantastic. I didn't see one negative thing with this ammo. The recoil wasn't that bad because it's only a 200 grain. Fantastic thermal ballistics. We're dumping that energy right away rather than going deep and slowly expanding. You know, my gut feeling tells me if you had to use this round, it's going to be twice as effective as the best 9mm. It just is. It's got a lot of good attributes to it, and it's not that hard to shoot, and it was very accurate. So a win-win-win with that 45 ACP. The 44 Special, well, if you got a Charter Arms, not a bad choice. If you got something like this Model 69, you might as well go up to something like a Buffalo Bore or Underwood that's going to have a lot more power, because you're going to get a lot better performance, still not have a lot of recoil. So yeah, overall our 45 did better here, but very interesting test. I finally got to test that 44 after 5 years, and that was a long wait for not much. So that's what you get today. So as always, comment, share, and like, and thanks for watching.